Hello, and welcome to episode 6 of the Pos-cast with Rabbi Shmuel Posner and myself, Seth Hellman. Rabbi, how you doing today?
Baruch Hashem, we are good. It's a sunny day. I set up the tent in the front yard. I called the tent for Torah because I learned with somebody there yesterday. I was sitting in my tent outside the Chabad house, and a car pulls up, and out jumps a chassid. And we had a nice shmooze. Shliach in New Haven. Shmuley Hecht pops in. He was driving by. He needed a place to daven. We took care of him. We farbranged. It was very nice. That's what's going on in Kenmore Square.
So last week we briefly mentioned cottage cheese, and we promised that the story would get told on the podcast this week. So why don't you go into why cottage cheese was brought up last week?
So this teaches me that when I tell you guys a story, you can torment me for the rest of my life. So
Just don't tell good stories, and we won't say
I just
anything
tell the
about it.
truth, man. What can I do? You got to live with it. That's what it is. It is what it is. So I'll tell you the story. I'll tell you something a little put into a setting. So when I went to yeshiva, so I went first in Brooklyn for 8 years, actually for 12 years through high school. Started out in Bedford-Stuyvesant, first 3 years, and then that's yeshiva closed. There was a fire there. We moved to Flatbush and was there through end of high school, and then 2 more years in Beis Medrash, and then went to Morristown for 2 years. Then went to Miami, went to Morristown for 2 years, Miami for 2 years. Then finally we came to 770 to learn in 770. 770, in addition to being the Rebbe's shul, is also the yeshiva, the top yeshiva after high school, elementary, high school. You finally come to 770. And that was like the dream, to come to 770 and learn in 770, which meant, first of all, it was a proper yeshiva, something we were learning, but also that we were in 770 near the Rebbe. So if the Rebbe came for those days, he would come Monday and Thursday for Torah reading. You were there in the shul with him. It was upstairs in the small shul across the Rebbe's office. And Mincha Ma'ariv, he would daven with the Bachram and whoever else was there. So it was an amazing, amazing, amazing time of life. It's something I look forward, even though I've been in Fabrangins and davening whenever I could in 770, but to be there every single day, a regular Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, to be with the Rebbe was just fantastic and amazing. But even though we were in close proximity to the Rebbe, 10 feet away, 5 feet away, whatever, the Rebbe walking in, walking out, there was still a certain hadras kavod, meaning like this great honor and respect for the Rebbe. So, you didn't go over and talk to him. And it was like, it wasn't like we didn't pal around with the Rebbe. He was there, it was always, whenever he walked, he was going somewhere. He was, directly where he's going, was just like wandering around, looking around, talking to people. So there was I just want to emphasize that, no familiarity. It wasn't like, chit-chatting with the Rebbe, like you go to some shul or some yeshiva. So the rabbi there, you talk to him, you schmooze around. There was no such thing whatsoever. There was like this element of what we would call malchus, kingship. Now, not literally a king, but just this respect bordering on awe. But like, so that's the setting of where we were at. And so now here's the cottage cheese story. So a friend of mine, his name is Nuti Luri, just in case anybody out there knows who he is. We were together in 770. We used to sit on the same table. He was not my study partner, my chavrusa, but he sat right next to me. And we got I knew him from camp or whatever. We knew him from yeshiva. We were buddies. So it was during break time. Maybe it was after morning davening, 10:30, or maybe it was probably it was about 10:30. So we're going to the store to get something to go down. We were going to breakfast and maybe pick something up in the store, Danish or something. And so Rabbi Groner said to me, "Can you if you're going out, can you please go to Kahn's, which is a little supermarket, and get a container of cottage cheese?" and he said, if they ask you, and just say it's for the Rebbe. So in other words, I guess he meant, I looked at him like, who's supposed to pay for this? I mean, who's it for? So he said it's for the Rebbe, to put on the Rebbe, they probably had an account, anything they needed for the Rebbe's personal needs while he was in 770. Obviously, he had when he went home, he had, that was completely separate. But while he was in 770, if he came in the morning, I guess he ate something during the day. The Rebbe could arrive at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning and stay till, late at night. He would go home every day at 5 o'clock, approximately, for about a half an hour. But most of it is there. So anyway, so I went to the store and I took the cottage cheese. My friend took whatever he had. And I saw, something, and the reason I remember the story so clearly was because I put it down on the counter and I said to the guy, I said, this is for the Rebbe. And my friend said, put down his thing and said, this is for me. Mocking me, saying, this is for the Rebbe. So I always remembered that, but the thing was, it was just, that's the story. I'm sure if I mentioned him, I think he'd probably remember also. I haven't mentioned him in years. I haven't seen him in a couple of decades. But that's a story. But there was a certain element, I think, just the idea of, you always give this example. You say, like, what's the importance of a mitzvah, right? Why do we do a mitzvah?
Because we're supposed to.
Because we're supposed to. Who said so?
Hashem said so.
So what does Hashem get from us doing a mitzvah?
I wasn't prepared for the questions to be turned on me today.
Yeah. But it's not. These are things you live with. You put on tefillin a half an hour ago, 2 hours ago. Why did you do that? What were you thinking?
Because you're supposed to. It's what
because
it's a way of being close to Hashem.
Because and how does that? Who said it's a way to get close to Hashem?
Hashem said it was.
Hashem said, no, these are not trick questions. Hashem said so. Hashem said so, right? And and we just had some shvuos and giving of the Torah, whole business. So what's the deal? The deal is very simple. If Hashem, so the example is given. If you have, let's say, a very, very important person, it could be anybody that you consider to be important in your life. It could be the president of your university. It could be the CEO of the company you're working for, and you're some student or some worker that just got hired, and the CEO asks you to do a favor for him. Can you do a favor? You go out, buy me a bottle of water, or it could be anything. Just the mere fact that you're able to do something for this person that's way beyond you, and Chassidus talks about a chacham, like a wise person, a great scholar who's way beyond anything, incomparable to you. And what you're doing is you're not sharing some kind of intellect with this great scholar. You're doing a simple favor, but even that is a connection. It's a connection. Parents who constantly with children, have a little child, a 3-year-old, say, can you please go get Tati his slippers? And the child comes and is so happy. Look, I brought Tati his slippers, right? Which really, it's not a big deal. He could have picked himself up and gotten it himself. But here the child feels this connection. I did something for somebody that's so much more important than me. And that's a connection. So Hashem asks you to test you, put on tefillin. You're right. The most basic reason is because you're supposed to. Hashem said so. What it does for you, we can talk about that. But the essential thing that you are doing what God asked you to do, like, wow, what greater privilege can there be? Okay. So that was in concept, in my mind was like that. Like the Rebbe is the Rebbe. He doesn't need me to do anything for him. I mean, he's the teacher, he's the Rebbe, his inspiration, all that. But like for me personally, what is he? He doesn't need anything from me personally. But to have the ability to do something for the Rebbe personally was something that stuck with me forever. And I don't think I ever did anything for the Rebbe. This is kind of like, when you do it for the Rebbe, you'd label Groner, Rabbi Groner a favor. You went to the store and got it. No, but ultimately that was the cottage cheese that the Rebbe ate that day, I assume. So that was, these are things that, Chassidim live with, the moments that the Rebbe said something to you, or, there was some kind of personal interaction, it's just very valuable. So there you go, the cottage cheese story.
Do you remember what brand of cottage cheese you bought?
Nope. I don't think I think back then there weren't many brands. It was Chalav Yisrael. And
right. Yeah. Sorry. Back in the dark ages. Continue.
This was in the early 80s. That's 1980s. So yeah, I don't think in Crown Heights there was much of a selection. So I do not recall him saying what kind to get. But I assume that, the one that was in the store was okay. That's that.
There's something interesting that you mentioned on a more serious note about the cottage cheese story in regards to the Rebbe and how, right, like you mentioned like the kingship aspect and how people just, you wouldn't just go up to the Rebbe and talk to him and have a conversation. But I don't know, I think to me, having not grown up in Chabad, it feels almost off, I guess, because you're talking about someone like if I think about it in this way where it's like, okay, if I want to talk to Hashem, what do? I daven, right? Like there's obviously there's a reverence for Hashem, but do I ever think twice about like, oh, should I be going up to this person and talking? Like, no, Hashem's not a person, but you get the reference, right? Where it's,
Yeah.
I'm never thinking twice about it. If I want to talk to Hashem, I'm going to go and daven, and I have there's no apprehension to going and doing that. There's no apprehension to going up to the king in this aspect
Mhm.
and talking to him. So are you not then adding too much of not that the Rebbe didn't deserve respect, but is there too much of a reverence for the Rebbe in that in that respect?
So I think you've put a couple of things together. It's a good way. You put a couple of things together. When you talk about Hashem, one of the incredible things about God is that even though he's the most immense, awesome, unbelievable, uncomparable to anything that exists, he's the source of all existence. Nonetheless, Hashem comes down into the lowest, darkest places that there are. So in fact, that isn't something which we should take for granted, but something that we could appreciate about Hashem, that how great Hashem is, and his greatness, where you see his greatness, you could see his humility. Like he comes down into, like you're the creator of everything, and you make sure every blade of grass gets turned over at a certain time. Really, that's really the infinite element of Hashem, that is not, or beyond infinite, that nothing's outside of God's presence. So the greatest are the greatest, and the smallest are the small. But that's Hashem, and that's definitely unique. No human being can be compared to that at all. But I'm just saying, in that sense, Hashem is there with you wherever you go. And sometimes you have to say, wait, am I taking Hashem here with me to fill in the blank, whichever nasty place you go to? Hockey game. So that's talking about Hashem. Now let's talk about the Rebbe. Okay, the reverence, which that's a good word. The reverence for the Rebbe is very classic. What do I mean by classic? If you look in the Shulchan Aruch, the laws of how you treat a Talmid Chacham, how you respect your father, your mother. Nowadays, the whole idea of respect for your parents is out the window. I mean, there are students, alumni, whatever, that call their parents by the first name, and to me, that's like I can't wrap my mind around it. To me, it's weird. They'll say to me, "Oh, Joe," and I'm thinking, yeah, "That's your father," And even when you say something like in a negative way, like, "Oh, like my mother has no patience for Joe," like what? You're talking about your father. You don't talk that way. It doesn't make any sense. So I think there has been a degradation of respect in general. Now, more particularly, use an example of somebody who's really respected in our times, in our era, in our life. The president of the United States. Like, do me a favor. You every time you see, you go online, somebody's making fun of the president, or and mocking him. And it's not just this president; it's just any president that happens to be. That's it's part of the way the media talks about great people is to make fun of them, and that's okay. Oh, that's all right. So you don't really have a great example of the idea of reverence and respect. But in truth, if you think about it, there are people in life that are that way. Again, using, let's say, the president of the university. You don't go over and pat him on the back and say, I mean, okay, I'm again not being particular. Some presidents, universities are like that. Some presidents, they have they present themselves in a certain way. Okay, and you may be right. There may be far and few and far in between. Where do you find people that really have that idea of reverence and respect? But I would say to you that in the Torah world, you do find that. You have that. You do have classic examples of a Rosh Yeshiva. Just today, one of the arguably the greatest or one of the greatest rabbis of the Litvish world in Torah study in Israel passed away, and you see the language that's used about him and the reverence and they are held on a higher level, and when you talk to them, you talk to them with a certain respect. I think we can imagine this when you talk about Moshe Rabbeinu. Just imagine Moshe Rabbeinu, like how did the Jews, even though they argue with him and this and that, but I can tell you from a personal perspective that there was a recognition that, and you see, you don't demand respect, you earn respect, right? So it wasn't that the Rebbe demanded anything from anybody. It wasn't that the Rebbe asked anybody for anything. And in the earlier years, when my father may well, knew the Rebbe before he was Rebbe, there was a certain, familiarity. In fact, I'll tell you a little Rebbe story. Yeah. So my father was, after the previous Rebbe had passed away, sometime during that year, my father went to Los Angeles to start being a shliach there. Or maybe wasn't that going to Los Angeles. Anyway, he had gone somewhere after the previous Rebbe passed away. He'd gone somewhere on some kind of a mission, to spread, teach Judaism in some town somewhere. And when he came back, the Rebbe extended his hand to Shalom Aleichem. Now, at this point, it was already after the previous Rebbe passed away. So many, and Rebbe didn't officially accept being Rebbe till a year later. But many, if not most, or can't say all, Hasidim recognized the Rebbe he's the Rebbe. The fact that the Rebbe didn't officially, like they would treat him as a Rebbe, like giving him notes when he would go to visit the previous Rebbe's very place, they would give him notes and the Rebbe accept them. So it was sort of like that. There was a great period there where the Rebbe didn't want to officially become known as Rebbe until a year later, on the first anniversary of the previous Rebbe's passing. So when the Rebbe extended his hand, Shalom Aleichem, to my father just stand there and didn't return the handshake. And so the Rebbe said, he said in Yiddish, an action, which means, you're stubborn. You're you're being stubborn. Okay. And
apple didn't fall very far from the tree.
So what was the point? The point was that my father wouldn't shake the Rebbe's hand, because now the Rebbe, it's different. It's a different thing. But as time, if you really want to do an in-depth study of the Rebbe from the early years to later years, you could see there was more familiarity earlier. As time went on, it became more and more, the reverence increased. Okay. Now, of course, you look at all the videos of dollars. People are talking to the Rebbe and asking him, and sometimes, the approachability of the Rebbe didn't go down. You can, look at 100 videos where people are talking to the Rebbe and with respect, but like it was easy to talk to the Rebbe, but the reverence was there as well. The recognition of this is, and the closer you were to the Rebbe, meaning some guy who just walked in off the street to get dollars may have a certain respect, but the person who's sitting in yeshiva or going to the Rebbe's Farbrengens for many years had a greater understanding of the greatness of the Rebbe, and therefore it increased the reverence. And that's why you found this concept of malchus, of kingship, which is a Jewish concept. If you look in the Rambam, Maimonides, or it talks about the laws of kings, it's like, whoa, you really have to respect the king. If you and in fact, disrespecting a king in a blatant way, you're liable for the death penalty. Now we don't think about. We think like, how could that be? That's the halacha. That's really the way it is. A true Jewish king. Okay, in those times, anointed, by the prophet, all that kind of stuff. But the concept of respect and awe is definitely within Judaism, and idea of even using the word kingship. Not that the Rebbe was a king in the classic way, for sure not. I mean, that didn't fit the description at all. But there was that element of behaving in such a way, and the Chassidim felt that towards the Rebbe. So it wasn't that the Rebbe placed himself above the Chassidim, but that the Chassidim sort of elevated the Rebbe in their eyes, how they interacted with him.
Did you have any? Yeah, it makes sense. Did you have any other instances where you interacted with the Rebbe at all, or did anything, or is aside from just like the regular old, I don't know, did you ever do the dollar thing? Was that a thing that like people who grew
I
up
have a
in
pile
it
of dollars like this? Yeah, thank God. Yeah, okay. We're gonna have to have like a couple of programs for this, but the answer is that being in the Rebbe's presence, like davening with the Rebbe, or being at the Rebbe's bringing that, you felt a personal connection. Okay, but I know that's you don't mean that. You mean more in a very specific, direct way. And the answer is there was a number of times, not a big number, but a number of times that, like when I went into a private audience with the Rebbe for my bar mitzvah, my 14th birthday, that was, it wasn't a long drawn out conversation. It was very directed, but it was a few minutes here and a few minutes there. By dollars, a few times, maybe 3 or 4 times max, where I spoke to the Rebbe about a student who came in, wanted something or whatever. And so that was, a personal interaction. But it wasn't, you didn't need to have that individual, everybody cherishes that. Like, oh, wow, the Rebbe said this to me, I said that to the Rebbe, and amazing, it's unbelievable, fantastic. It's not that when Chassidim say, "Oh, it was so wonderful when we could be with the Rebbe," I think primarily it's about being with the Rebbe when the Rebbe's giving us farbrengen. When the Rebbe's being the Rebbe, but not when he's being the Rebbe for you particularly, like he's talking to you in the personal interaction. That's not really. That's wonderful, beautiful. It's precious, but it doesn't really define the real relationship that Chassidim have with the Rebbe.
So to kind of close things out for this week's episode, have you had any good interactions with regular people throughout this past week?
Just regular people. There are no
regular people.
Every Jew is a precious diamond. So here's one. So there's this kid that goes to school here, and he knows Chabad from his home, whatever. But we got pretty close during this last year. And I used to put on film with him. I meet him at school. He actually goes to Berkeley College of Music. Put on film with him, and then I said he had his own. He bought it from his house. Started putting on film, and so we see him a couple times a week. And he came for Shavuos. He came the first day, came the second day. That was that. And then I got a call the day after Shavuos. That was what, Sunday late afternoon, from a bacher who lives in Boston, who had been home for Shavuos. And he says, I was on a bus going to New York, and this guy gets onto the bus. He comes over to me, sits down next to me, he says, "You have to fill in." And I said, "Yeah, I have to fill in." He says, "Yeah, I've started putting on tefillin, but I didn't put on tefillin today. So can I put on tefillin?" And he tells me the name of the guy, Ethan. I said, "Oh," and I described what he looks like. And he said, "Oh, that's, he has big, rather, red hair, whatever." And yeah, that's the guy. I said, "Yeah." And we were sitting and talking for 4 hours on the bus ride. I said, "It's amazing. It's fantastic. It's like unbelievable. Like, could you imagine? Like, you happen to be on the bus at the same time, and he wanted to put on his film." And so that to me was like, that was so fantastic. But then something that the Rebbe taught us was, anytime you are part of a hashgacha prata, something happens, and just happened. This just happened. Something has to come out of it. In fact, he said that was the whole reason for the giving the dollars at dollars, was that because essentially the dollar was to take that dollar and give it tzedakah. And the Rebbe knew that nobody's giving away that dollar. The dollar they got from the Rebbe's hand, they're keeping it forever, right? So the Rebbe said, give this dollar or exchange it for another dollar. Basically motivating you to give a dollar to tzedakah. You want to give this one? Fine. You want to give another one? That's your choice. But I'm giving you a dollar. I'm making you a messenger to do a mitzvah. And the point was, two Jews meet, there should be an outcome of a mitzvah, especially if you could benefit from another Jew. That's the best thing to do. So anytime there's this like, oh, divine providence, I just happen to meet this guy. The question is, look, what are we going to do about it? We have to move forward with it. So I said to this guy, I said, it's fantastic. You sat on the bus for 4 hours, isn't that? And he said, yeah. And in fact, we exchanged phone numbers. I said, well, if you're in New York and he's somewhere in upstate New York, why don't you bring him down to Crown Heights? Take him to 770, maybe spend a day in yeshiva there. So, and I spoke to him about it, and we spoke for about 10 minutes trying to figure out a good plan, like when he's, because he knew the guy that Ethan's coming to Manhattan before Shabbos, after Shabbos, whatever, the details are not important. But the point was, I said to him, you can't just leave. It's amazing and fantastic, and Hashem runs the world. It's unbelievable that you met him on the bus, but what's going to happen as a result of it? You got to take it to the next level. And so, yeah, so that's my my great HP Hashgacha Pratis, Hashem runs the world story for this week.
It's funny because when I think of it, the biggest example for me was when I went to 770 for the first time, right? And you knew that I was going, and you were like, talk to Yisrael, send a message to Yisrael, and I just for whatever reason didn't. And then I'm standing outside of 770, and who do I run into? Yisrael.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. Tanya now, what we're learning in the daily Tanya is talking about how Hashem creates the world every moment, and therefore nothing happens by chance. I mean, this is a real thing, and I just get excited every time it happens. You decide to go somewhere and you meet that person. If you would have gone a minute earlier, a minute later, you wouldn't meet that person. So it's not like, oh, it just happened. It doesn't just happen. It's all orchestrated. And then again, the most important thing after that is take it to the next level. What do you? Here, a short one. This morning, I was looking at my phone for somebody's name, or I don't know, I had to send a message to somebody, and somebody's name popped up, and I sent them a message. Say, he doesn't live in this he doesn't live in this country even. I said, oh, I hope and trust that everything's all well with you, and with your family, with your city. He's big in the Chabad community there, in the community. And he writes back. We had an exchange of texts, like going up and back like 6 or 7 times, and basically, he said to me that he had written a letter to the Rebbe about a certain issue that he was having, and I can tell you, about a question about bitachon, trust in Hashem. And he said, in your message you wrote, I hope and trust all is well with you. And he said, you just used the word trust, and I just wrote a letter yesterday to the Rebbe saying, what do you mean write a letter to the Rebbe? Like, it's a way of reaching out to the Rebbe in whatever way that means, and however the Rebbe would respond. I said, there's your answer. You got the word. He said, I see the word trust, and I'm like, this is so coincidental. No, so this is so Hashem running the world. And I said to him, you have no idea. And we talked up and back a couple of times about what was going on, and then he sent me a very nice message. It was really fantastic talking to him. And I said to him, I said, you have no idea how random it was that I even messaged you today. But of course, it wasn't random. It wasn't random. Hashem wanted it to happen. There's hundreds of people I could have sent a message to, but I sent it to him, and he needed to hear it. And we were able to exchange something. And I said to him, you should know that the Rebbe always taught us to give, but the receiver is grateful for what he gets. But the one who gives actually gets more than the receiver who receives. The fact that he's able to have that opportunity, privilege, to be able to interact with another person and help them out in whatever way it is, that's really fantastic. So everybody's a winner.
Well, on that note, I think you're a winner if you've stuck with us for this whole podcast. And I think that's all we have for this week for episode 6 of the Pos-cast. So thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week, same time, same place.